You turn off the bathroom light and suddenly, you're sprinting to your bed like something's chasing you. You're 30 years old. There is nothing there. Or is there? Your rational brain knows the house is locked. The alarm is set. Your phone has a flashlight brighter than any torch your ancestors ever held. And yet, the second the room goes black, something ancient wakes up inside you. Something that has nothing to do with logic and everything to do with survival. By the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why your brain still does this. Why fear of the dark isn't a childish leftover you should have grown out of. And why, honestly, it's kind of a miracle that it still works at all. Let's go back. Not 10 years. Not 100. 2 million years. Back when your ancestors had no walls, no locks, no light switch. Just skin, a sharpened stick, and a sky that turned pitch black every single night. No street lights. No glow from a phone screen. No neighbor's porch light leaking through the curtains. This was the kind of dark where you held your hand in front of your face and genuinely couldn't tell if it was still attached to your arm. And in that darkness, somewhere out there, something was always watching. For almost the entire span of human evolution, night wasn't a peaceful pause between one busy day and the next. It was the most dangerous 12 hours your ancestors would ever face. Every single day of their lives. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Biologically, humans are almost defenseless at night. We have weak night vision compared to most predators. No claws, no fangs. We can't outrun almost anything that wants to eat us. Our best weapon is a brain that plans ahead. But planning doesn't help much. When you can't see 3 feet in front of you, drop a human into a pitch-black forest. 40,000 years ago, and on paper, we were basically a slow, soft, snack-sized animal waiting to be found. Meanwhile, the animals hunting us were built for exactly this moment. Big cats have a reflective layer behind. Their retinas that lets them gather far more light than we ever could. Their pupils widen further. Their hearing is sharper. Night wasn't just their territory. It was their advantage, engineered by millions of years of evolution, specifically for the hours when we were blindest. This isn't speculation. Researchers studying early hominin remains have found puncture marks and bite patterns on ancient skulls that match the jaw spacing of big cats. Physical evidence that our ancestors weren't just occasionally hunted. They were regularly hunted, and often it appears under cover of darkness, when they were least able to see a threat coming or defend themselves against it. Cave lions were significantly larger than the lions alive today. Hyenas hunted in coordinated packs using darkness and numbers together. And for most of our evolutionary history, humans had no fire, no shelter, and no weapon that reliably worked against a set of jaws that could crush bone in a single bite. If you didn't feel afraid in the dark, you simply didn't last long enough to have children. It's that direct and that unforgiving. This is the part that flips the whole story. That jolt of panic when the lights go out isn't a malfunction in your brain. It's a feature, one that got selected for generation after generation. For roughly 2 million years, every single one of your ancestors, going back further than we can even count, felt that exact same spike of fear the moment darkness fell. And it worked. It kept them cautious enough, alert enough, and quiet enough to survive until morning. The nervous ones lived long enough to pass on their genes. The relaxed ones, statistically, did not. So when your heart jumps at a creak in your house at 2 a.m., that's not weakness, and it's not something to be embarrassed about. That's a survival tool with an unbroken track record, still running exactly as it was designed to, inside a brain that hasn't had time to catch up to how safe your life actually is now. For most of human history, there was exactly one real weapon against the dark: fire. Humans have controlled fire for hundreds of thousands of years, and it changed everything about what nighttime meant. Fire wasn't just for cooking. It was a floodlight, a heater, an insect repellent, and, most importantly, a wall between your sleeping body and every set of eyes glowing somewhere out past the tree line. Around a fire, predators tended to keep their distance. Without one, the night belonged entirely to whatever happened to be hunting that evening. This is also probably why staring at a campfire still feels so strangely relaxing today, even with zero survival need for it. Research on flame watching has found it can lower blood pressure and induce something close to a meditative state. Your brain runs on an old, hard-coded rule. If there is fire, we are safe. We haven't died yet, but fire didn't come first. For a huge stretch of early human history, our ancestors had no flame at all, and the fear of darkness had to work purely on instinct. cooperation, and numbers. Groups huddled physically close together at night, not primarily out of affection, but out of pure strategic necessity. More bodies meant more ears listening for danger, more eyes, even if barely useful in the dark. And critically, safety in sheer numbers, since a predator is far less likely to approach a tight group than an isolated straggler. The individuals who wandered off alone after dark, or who slept apart from the group, were disproportionately the ones who simply disappeared from the historical and fossil record. Staying close to others at night wasn't comfort. It was math, and the math was brutal. Here's where it gets strange. You now live in the safest environment your species has ever experienced. Locked doors, security cameras, streetlights on every corner, a phone that can summon police in seconds and call a friend even faster. And you still can't walk down a dark hallway without your brain quietly insisting something is behind you. That's not irrational. That's your Stone Age alarm system, fully intact, still guarding against a threat that hasn't meaningfully existed in your environment for tens of thousands of years. Studies using brain imaging have found that in low light, the amygdala, the brain's fear processing center, becomes measurably more active, even when there's no actual danger present at all. Darkness itself, all on its own, is enough to flip the switch. Your brain doesn't need evidence of a threat. The absence of light is treated as evidence enough. This also explains something almost every parent has dealt with: why young children are terrified of the dark far more intensely, and far more often than adults. Research into childhood fears has found that fear of darkness tends to peak somewhere around ages 3 to 6, right around the age when ancient toddlers would have become mobile enough to wander off from the group on their own, but not yet strong, fast, or aware enough to defend themselves if something went wrong. That fear wasn't cruelty built in by evolution. It was a leash. A built-in, non-negotiable reason for a small, defenseless human to stay close to the fire, and close to the adults who could actually protect them. Every child who has ever refused to sleep without a nightlight is running the exact same ancient program that once kept toddlers alive long enough to become adults themselves. Ever notice how certain sounds hit completely differently in the dark than the exact same sound does in daylight? A branch snapping outside, a floorboard creaking upstairs, something rustling just past the edge of your tent on a camping trip. In daylight, your brain shrugs these off instantly. At night, your senses snap to full alert, almost before you've consciously registered the sound at all. This happens because in the dark, sound becomes your only real early warning system. Your ancestors couldn't see a predator circling closer through the trees. They could only hear it. So the brain learned, over an enormous span of time, to treat every unexplained noise at night as a potential threat first, and a harmless explanation only second, if ever. You're not paranoid when a noise at 3 a.m. makes your whole body freeze. You're running the exact threat detection software that kept your ancestors alive back when their eyes were completely useless. This is also why your brain seems to invent monsters out of nothing at all. A coat draped over a chair suddenly looks like a person standing silently in the corner. A shadow shifts slightly and instantly looks like it moved on its own. This is a well-documented cognitive tendency known as pareidolia, the brain's habit of finding faces and figures in random shapes and in low light. It goes into overdrive. Your brain would rather falsely flag 10 harmless shapes as dangerous than risk missing one real predator hiding among them. A false alarm just costs you an embarrassing jump and a racing heart for a few seconds. Missing a real threat cost your ancestors their entire life, and possibly the lives of everyone sleeping near them. So evolution built a brain that is perfectly happy to be wrong 1,000 times, as long as it is never, ever wrong about the one time it actually matters. And then there's what happens when you're actually asleep in the dark. Every single night, your mind manufactures entire worlds from scratch, some of them warm and pleasant, some of them genuinely terrifying, filled with monsters, chases, and threats that make no logical sense once you wake up. For most of human history, there was no neuroscience to explain any of this, so dreams and nightmares were very often interpreted as real, external events, visits from ancestors, warnings from spirits, omens about the future. To your ancestors, the line between the dangers lurking in the dream world and the dangers lurking in the actual dark forest just outside the fire barely existed. Both felt equally real, and both were treated as equally worth fearing. Because in a world without streetlights or locked doors, they often blurred into each other by morning. The ancient nightmare demon. There's an even stranger piece of this puzzle: sleep paralysis. It's a real, well-documented phenomenon where a person wakes up mentally, but their body remains temporarily locked in the muscle paralysis your brain uses to stop you from acting out your dreams. People experiencing it often report a crushing weight on their chest, a sense of a menacing presence in the room, and total inability to move or speak, almost always in the dark. Remarkably, cultures all over the world, with no contact with each other, independently developed folklore describing an almost identical nighttime entity. A shadowy figure sitting on the sleeper's chest, a hag in European folklore, a demon in parts of Asia, a spirit pressing down on the body, in accounts from Africa and the Americas. Different cultures, different centuries, same terrifying darkroom experience, same instinct to explain it as something predatory sitting in the darkness with you. That's not coincidence. That's a shared piece of ancient wiring expressing itself through completely separate belief systems. In fact, look at almost any culture on Earth, and you'll find some version of a creature that comes out specifically at night, something that waits in shadows, that can't be seen clearly, that preys on people who wander too far from safety after dark. This pattern repeats itself with almost eerie consistency across societies that never had contact with one another. And that consistency is a clue. It suggests these stories aren't really about any one specific monster at all. They're a cultural expression of something deeper and older, an inherited, biological unease about darkness that every human society had to explain somehow. So they built stories around it. The monster changes from place to place. The underlying fear driving the story stays exactly the same. It's worth sitting with just how high the stakes actually were, historically. Estimates from anthropological research into hunter-gatherer populations suggest that predator encounters accounted for a meaningful share of adult deaths in some ancient groups, and a disproportionate number of those encounters happened at night, when humans were most exposed and least capable of defending themselves. This wasn't some rare freak danger tucked away in the margins of ancient life. For an enormous stretch of our history, nighttime vulnerability was one of the leading, recurring causes of death for our species, full stop. Fear of the dark wasn't an overreaction to a small, manageable risk. It was a precisely calibrated, completely proportional response to one of the single biggest threats our ancestors ever had to face, night after night, for hundreds of thousands of years. For most of history, defeating darkness meant defeating it just a little bit at a time. Fire came first, then oil lamps, then candles that could be carried room to room. Each small advance in artificial light pushed back the edge of danger just slightly further. Streets in some ancient cities employed watchmen specifically to carry torches and patrol after dark, because a lit street was a safer street. Then, in a shockingly short window of time compared to the rest of human history, electric light arrived. Within about a century, entire cities went from candlelight to lit streets that never truly go dark at all. Your ancestors spent 2 million years evolving a brain wired for constant nighttime vigilance. It took less than 200 years to make that vigilance almost, but not quite, unnecessary. You'd think, given how thoroughly modern life has lit up the night, that fear of darkness would have simply faded away by now. It hasn't, not even close. That's because evolution doesn't update on the timescale of a single century, or even several centuries. Genetic and neurological changes typically require many thousands of years of consistent pressure to meaningfully shift. Electric light has existed for roughly 1/1000th of the time your fear response spent being built. In evolutionary terms, streetlights are practically brand new. Your amygdala doesn't know that. It's still operating on the assumption that darkness equals danger, because for nearly the entire history of your species, that assumption was completely correct. Here's the twist that makes this whole story even stranger. Despite genuinely fearing the dark, humans also actively seek it out, on our own terms. We pay money to sit in dark theaters and watch horror movies. We tell ghost stories around campfires specifically to scare each other. Haunted houses are a booming seasonal industry. Researchers who study fear and entertainment suggest this works because of controlled exposure. When you know on some level that you're safe, locked doors, other people around, a screen between you and the monster, your brain gets to experience the ancient fear, Response without the ancient consequences. It's the same alarm system firing, the same racing heart, the same spike of adrenaline your ancestors felt facing a real predator in real darkness. Except now it's happening on a couch. With popcorn, and you get to walk away afterward. Your body doesn't fully know the difference. It just knows it survived the fear again, and that feels oddly satisfying. If you've ever bought a nightlight for a child who refuses to sleep in total darkness, you were unknowingly recreating something your ancestors did with actual fire, tens of thousands of years ago. A small, constant source of light at the edge of a child's bed does exactly what a fire once did at the edge of a sleeping group. It pushes back the boundary of the unknown, just far enough to make the dark feel survivable. Parents often assume this fear is something kids will simply grow out of, as if it's a phase with no deeper explanation. In reality, it's not a phase being outgrown, so much as a threat assessment. System slowly recalibrating as a child learns, through years of safe nights, that the modern dark is far less dangerous than the ancient one. Some adults never fully recalibrate either. And now you know exactly why that isn't something to be embarrassed about. If you want to feel this entire system reawaken almost instantly, go camping. Spend one night in a tent, away from streetlights, away from the low hum of a city that never quite goes fully dark. And notice how quickly your brain shifts back into high alert. Every twig snap outside the tent suddenly sounds enormous. Every rustle in nearby bushes gets your full attention immediately. People who are perfectly calm and rational in their well-lit homes often report feeling a genuine, visceral unease on their very first night sleeping outdoors. That's not you being irrational or overly anxious. That's a fully intact ancient alarm system, finally getting an environment that actually resembles the one it was built for, waking back up almost instantly after decades of relative disuse. There's one more piece of this worth knowing. Complete total darkness. The kind found deep in a cave or inside a sensory deprivation tank, affects people differently than ordinary nighttime darkness. Without any visual reference point at all, some people report a growing sense of unease, disorientation, or even mild panic after extended periods, regardless of how objectively safe the space actually is. Researchers who study extreme environments note that total sensory absence appears to unsettle the brain in a way that's distinct from simply being in a dim room. It's one thing to know a threat could theoretically be nearby. It's another thing entirely to have literally no sensory information at all with which to check. Your brain, it turns out, doesn't just dislike darkness because of what might be hiding in it. It dislikes the complete absence of information itself, because for nearly its entire evolutionary history, an absence of information was often the very last thing you noticed before something dangerous found you first. So the next time, you sprint from the light switch to your bed, like something is chasing you. Don't feel silly about it, and don't try to talk yourself out of it with pure logic. Logic isn't really what's running the show in that moment. You're not scared of the dark. You're carrying the fear of every single ancestor who almost didn't make it through the night, hunted, exposed, and defenseless against creatures, built specifically for the hours when humans were blindest. And somehow, every single time, enough of them made it through until morning to eventually become you. That fear isn't a glitch in an otherwise perfect brain. It's a 2-million-year-old inheritance, still working exactly as intended, quietly running in the background of a world that, for now at least, no longer needs it quite this much. If your brain enjoyed being reminded just how ancient it really still is, hit subscribe. There's a lot more Stone Age software quietly running inside you than you probably ever realized.